The middle class never existed. The closest thing I saw to middle class was Prince George's County, Maryland, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and early 2000s. And that's slowly going away. Part of it is becoming Central and South America. The other part is becoming lower income poverty, right? When I got to Maryland in the early 90s, I was blown away by all the black people that had houses in Prince George's County, Maryland. And I understand Atlanta has neighborhoods like that, and Houston has black neighborhoods like that, or had. I don't know where they are today. If anyone knows, I hope to see it in the comments at some point. So intergenerational instability, where I saw that those black families in Prince George's County, it wasn't sustained, right? And in 2025, it's reduced to about 20% of what it was only just 30 years ago. Remember I said it takes 2 generations. 1 generation is 20 years, so 2 generations is 40 years. Here we go. We're in a 30-year cycle, and that was there before I got there. But anyway, political and policy failures here. The tripwires. Erosion of affirmative action. So, affirmative action in itself as a program was meant to give black people opportunities. Not really just give it to them just because they're black, but because there were discriminatory practices in the workplace in the first place. So you find a black person that's qualified for the job, but a white person who is slightly less qualified for the job will actually get a job because they're white. Right? So that's what affirmative action was put there to guarantee that qualified black people were actually getting those opportunities. This wasn't anybody giving anybody anything, right? As it's the misnomer of what affirmative action is. And the fact that it never actually became that because the narrative around it became they're giving it to people. Right, and that was not the intention of affirmative action in the first place. Rollbacks of race-conscious policies, college admissions, hiring, threatened pathways to upward mobility for black professionals. Same situation. There were situations before a lot of these policies came into play, and then ultimately they were rolled back because the popular narrative around it is that black people were being given something. And God forbid America give black people something like they gave white people land. Right? Yeah, they gave white people land off the boat. Right? But that wasn't a problem. We had to build the country. We needed people, and we just wanted to build our country up, so we had to give these white immigrants land. Thousands of acres of land, right? They all, at the end of the day, that was justifiable in giving it to them, right? Let alone all the corporate advantages that a lot of these companies get in the form of corporate welfare. It's okay, everything is justifiable when it's not black people, right? But when it's black people, all of the hemming and hawing and different things come up with relation to black people. So, again, a situation where white colleges, were not admitting qualified black people because they were black, and then these policies had to be enacted in order to get the black people who were qualified in those positions, right? So somehow the narrative around it became, well, black people, they're giving it to them, right? So underqualified black people are actually getting into these jobs or getting into these universities. And that was just not the case with it. Underfunded public institution cuts to education, healthcare, and social services disproportionately harm communities, undermining middle class stability. Here we have a situation where what they do is the crime is committed first, right? And then they create the conditions in the environment to bring about the justification of the crime. So in the situation where you have a city, pick any city in America that's at least 40% black, right? The crime in that you underfund the city first, regardless to the property taxes, regardless to the diligence that the black people are trying within their neighborhoods. And then you create the circumstances to justify the crime. So in this case, the justification of the underfunding of the city. So in a lot of cases, you do things like maybe build low-income housing, free housing in the area where there are homeowners. And then you drive the circumstances down within the neighborhood. So you have a hodgepodge of homeowners, and then you have low-income housing. Remind you, for people that have or live in low-income housing, they're tied to the system. So they are actually wards of the state, the responsibility of the state. So the state has placed these low-income people within our neighborhood. So they are forcing these black neighborhoods to become destabilized. And how many, I'm sure black people listening to this, and again, let's go back. I have to go back to these because I have to recall who this is for. This is for the Gen X people, right? Who know these images, who remember these images or images like this, 45 to 60 years old. Now, how many of you remember neighborhoods from the 70s and 80s that were nice neighborhoods? Compton, California, I'm talking to you. They were nice neighborhoods in the 70s and 80s that have bad reputations now. And I'm sure they have nice areas, parts of those places, but they don't have those reputations today, right? You talk to anybody that's in their 60s that are from Compton. I talked about two brothers from Compton, and they say, man, Compton was a nice place in the 60s, right? And then everybody from LA started coming out here. And then that's when it went down. And say, Baltimore, Randallstown, Woodlawn, right? Everybody from the city started moving out to Westside Woodlawn. And that's what happened. Roosevelt, Long Island, everybody from the city started moving out there. And this is what happened. I'm sure that happened in any city. Shoot, that even happens in former black middle class areas in Africa, in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, right? You see the nice middle class areas of the 70s and 80s are slums in the 90s and 2000s. You're like, what happened up to the 2020s? You're like, was this a plan? That sounds like a plan to me. Yeah, Kanye West talking about, that sounds like what do you say? That sounds like a choice to me. Now what I just talked about, that sounds like a plan to me. There's no way that there's a coincidence that all these things happen to black people over a period of time where their wealth is being eroded. So we have the situation where they create the narrative. They do the crime first to create the narrative. So they underfund the area. They underfund Baltimore, right? Create the circumstances to justify the underfunding. So now, when they go to say something, well, see, this what happens. It's a democratic city. This what happened. You got people. You got instability. You got a mess on your hands. So black people are left speechless. Like, well, we can't really say anything about this because that's really what it is. Not going back to the foundation of the fact that they were underfunded and they put these trick wars in place to get at black people. So this is where we are. America does not have a real middle class. And these are the images that they sold us, Gen X, 45 to 60-year-olds, that never really manifested. They tried to bring it up today. They tried to put new faces on it with Diddy, Jay-Z, and Beyonce, but it just doesn't have the same luster as these Kyrie Irving's parents. No, I'm kidding. But this is how we remember it, right? Look at Rudy. We all wanted a little sister like Rudy, right? Janet Jackson and Todd Bridges. A lot of these people turned out to be tragedies, right? We thought this was pure wholesome blackness, but a lot of these things turned out to be tragedies. And this article by Antonio Moore was written back in like 2017. We're in 2025, 8 years later, and we're on the cusp of that being accelerated because we're going to get into black wealth here. And they're starting to erode. This is war, family. This is war, right? The accelerating of the process of the elimination and genocide of black people in America. Let's just talk about it, right? Like, let's not put any more band-aids on it. Let's not drink any more elixirs or apply any more ointments. Let's root this thing out. So the further erosion of the system, let me pause this here. The further erosion in the system for black people here has been accelerated with the advent of your boy, and I ain't no Democrat or Republican. I can do a whole video on Obama and Joe Biden, right? But the current incarnation of the devil, right? Donald Trump has further accelerated the process of the elimination of black people. Let's just call it what it is. We can't sugarcoat this anymore because this is an actual state of emergency here, right? Social Security Administration would cut up to 50% of its workforce. So let's talk about it here. And I don't know if my sound is working on this thing. I need to double check it here because it's working. So we know Social Security Administration, federal government as a whole, is just a place where black people have accumulated wealth in the last 60 years. Nice little retirement plans. And income, and provided a source of growth for black people, right? It's a leg up for our people. And now Donald Trump is threatening to remove that. And I know for a fact in Baltimore they have a big Social Security Administration office building there, and most people that work there are black people. So let's go through these little videos and then we'll go through a few articles on this.
Fraud team and other running sectors, so it would force a shutdown in order for the federal judge to further clarify what he meant. The judge's ruling was not as broad as the administrator is saying. However, due to the legal loophole that he found, he would essentially force the judge's hand and could jeopardize millions of Americans acting Social Security.
You're a fucking fraud. If you call them because you or your loved one lost their Social Security check and you're complaining about it, they don't want to hear shit.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month. A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining.
That's Howard Lutnick, Trump's Secretary of Commerce, who, by the way, is a billionaire. So if his mother-in-law, who's 94 years old, misses one Social Security check, which I'm pretty sure she's not on no motherfucking Social Security, even if she was, this motherfucker could pay for her shit. But Trump and Doge, through Elon Musk, is trying to cut thousands of jobs through the Social Security Administration. And Social Security was already dealing with backlogs. And because of all these extra cuts in staff, employees are warning that the job cuts could worsen the services. Quote, the public is going to suffer terribly as a result of this, the source wrote to NPR. Local field offices will close, hold times will increase, and people will be sicker, hungry, and die when checks don't arrive or a disability hearing is delayed just 1 month too late. But remember, don't fucking call them because you're a fraudster if you complain.
So there we go. We got the Social Security Administration. They're about to cut up to, we're just getting started. Donald Trump, I'm not a Democrat or Republican, again. This is just the latest incarnation of the devil here. He just happens to be a Republican. I really don't care. So here we are, the role of Social Security Administration, and why Black people should really pay attention to this, because again, this is where a lot of our existing income and wealth comes from today, right? So being a Black worker at Social Security Administration, which is one agency of the federal government, again, where Black people are all the way through a lot of these federal agencies, but one of the biggest here by percentage. It's been a pathway to the middle class for a lot of Black people. I know, especially in the East Coast area. Philadelphia, well, it's the IRS. But I know Maryland for a fact, and D.C. Social Security Administration jobs have historically provided Black Americans with stable, unionized federal employment, offering competitive wages, pensions, and healthcare benefits. And let me add, in addition, we're going to be doing something on the postal workers just after this. But, you talk about even in the city, right? The city and state jobs, especially public works, right? Either public works, sanitation, things like that. A lot of brothers in those jobs. MTA, if you live in a city with a strong mass transit, MARTA in Georgia, MTA in New York, Metro in D.C., the T in Boston, are big employers of Black people here. But we're talking about Social Security Administration and federal, mostly, that Donald Trump is making cuts to. Social Security Administration jobs have historically provided Black Americans with stable, it's a check, a nice little check, with benefits, unionized federal employment, offering competitive wages, pensions, and healthcare benefits, right? So you go to the 7-Eleven, you see the brother with the shorts and dress shoes and dress socks, right, chilling, drinking his coffee with a few other buddies, and you're like, what are they doing? They are enjoying those nice little pensions that they got. They chilling. And Friday, they're going to go down to the VFW and chill some more, right? Those are those pensions and healthcare benefits. These roles, example given, claim specialists, customer service, enabled upward mobility, home ownership, and intergenerational wealth building in Black communities. So when Pop, that's been hanging in front of the 7-Eleven in his shorts and his dress socks and dress shoes and his, Cadillac, he's chilling. When he dies, because of his pension, you don't have to pay for his funeral. His body don't have to sit up there for 2 weeks while you wait to collect this funeral money. He is taken care of. He's good. And if he's married, the widow is going to be good until she dies. She's going to receive the benefits. That's the pathway That's generational wealth. It's not when the husband dies, the wife has to go out and struggle and hustle till she dies. She's taken care of by him. That's the value of these jobs to our community. And when those things are taken out, intergenerational wealth is lost completely. Overrepresentation in the public sector. You go to them places, go down. I'm talking about any. This is Social Security Administration specifically. You talk about any state, local government. You see black people at the counter for the most part. I love to see it, and I know they have good jobs, and we're not knocking good jobs, but we're talking about the loss of these good jobs and the downstream impacts to black people. Black workers are disproportionately employed in federal agencies like the Social Security Administration compared to the private sector where systemic racism often limits opportunities. Let's go back to this one here. So we talked about affirmative action and why affirmative action exists. It's not a handout to people just basis on the color of their skin. It's actually giving a job to the qualified people, black people in this case, because they weren't given the opportunities because they're qualified, just because they're black. It seemed like for the last 60 years, the only people who complied with that policy was the federal government. They didn't hire these black people because they were black. They hired them because they were qualified. Let me say that again. The federal government enacted these affirmative action laws and policies that were put in place to take black people into consideration who were qualified. So today, we see the situation where the federal government was the only one that complied with that law. Not only that, they didn't enforce that the private sector ensure that they were upholding the policy. So at the end of the day, we're still in a situation where the federal government has the highest percent of black employees because they're the only ones complying with their own law, and they're not ensuring that the private sector companies who operate in their country that they have policy over were doing that, right? So we're in a situation where the Social Security Administration and many other federal agencies are the highest percentage of black workers, and the private sector still lagging behind because they just like, we ain't finna hire no black people, alright? We're just gonna find different cute ways not to be able to hire them, which is fine. Good. Black people need their own to build their own jobs anyway. But that's not the topic here. We're talking about Donald Trump and the erosion of the black middle class and why this is actually a state of emergency. Let's go back to the imagery here. This is the bill of goods that they sold us. A lot of us took these federal jobs trying to achieve this, what we saw here. They sold this 45 to 60-year-old shout out, right? You remember you used to go to club 30 and over, throw your hands, 45 and to 60, throw your hands, because this was our childhood right here, right?